Story 1. The Quilt of Memories ****. In a small, sunlit living room, a soft breeze carried the scent of freshly laundered fabric. Amelia sat beside her grandmother on an old wooden rocking chair, the quilt stretched across their laps. The quilt wasn't just any quilt, it was the family's history, sewn square by square over decades. Each patch told a story. There was a piece of pale blue fabric from a dress Amelia's mother wore to her high school prom, stitched next to a faded plaid square from her grandfather's favorite shirt. Grandma's deft hands moved quickly, threading a needle as she prepared to sew a new square, one for Amelia. "Why do we add a square, Grandma?" Amelia asked, running her fingers over the soft fabric. "Well," Grandma said, her voice gentle and rhythmic, "every square is like a chapter in a book. This quilt is our family's story, and every generation adds a piece of themselves." Amelia picked up a piece of green gingham fabric she had chosen earlier. It came from her favorite summer dress, the one she wore when she climbed the old oak tree in the backyard and fell, breaking her arm. "Remember this one?" Grandma asked, holding up a square of red with tiny white polka dots. Amelia nodded. "That's from your apron. The one you wore when you baked cookies with me." "Exactly. And that's why we sew it in. So one day, you can tell your children about the smell of chocolate chip cookies and the flour we always ended up spilling." As they worked together, Grandma told Amelia stories tied to other patches. There was the yellow piece from the curtains that hung in the farmhouse where Grandma grew up, and a deep navy square that came from the uniform her father wore during the war. By the time they finished sewing Amelia's square into place, the sun had set, casting a golden glow over the room. They stood back and admired the quilt, now more vibrant and full of life. "Someday, Amelia," Grandma said, folding the quilt lovingly, "this will be yours to pass on. And I hope you'll keep adding stories." Amelia smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. In that moment, she felt more connected to her family than ever before, knowing she was part of a story that would continue to grow. Story 2. The Treehouse Chronicles ****. The treehouse was built on a summer afternoon 20 years ago. Perched in the tallest oak in the backyard, it became a haven for siblings Emma, Jake, and little Lucas. Their father had spent weeks sawing, hammering, and painting while they helped by holding tools and offering advice that was mostly ignored. But time passed, and the treehouse fell into disrepair. Emma moved out for college, Jake joined the Navy, and Lucas, the youngest, grew up and left the small town. Years later, a family reunion brought them back to the house where their mother still lived. The oak tree, gnarled and sturdy, stood proudly in the backyard, its branches cradling the neglected treehouse. "I can't believe it's still standing," Jake said, tilting his head up to look at it. "It's probably full of spiders," Emma said, though a smile played on her lips. Lucas, now an architect, studied the structure thoughtfully. "It needs work, but we can save it." The three siblings spent the next 2 days repairing the treehouse. Emma scrubbed away years of dirt, Jake replaced the broken planks, and Lucas sketched plans to make it sturdier. As they worked, memories bubbled up like a stream. "Remember when we used to sneak up here to eat snacks after Mom told us no?" Jake said, grinning. "And when Lucas spilled grape soda all over the floorboards?" Emma added. Lucas laughed. "Hey, I was 6. By the time the treehouse was complete, it looked almost new, with fresh paint and a rope ladder that swayed gently in the breeze. The three climbed up together, the wood creaking softly beneath them. The view hadn't changed. The backyard stretched out below, dotted with flowers their mother had planted, and beyond that, the rolling hills of their childhood town. Sitting in the treehouse, they talked late into the evening. They shared stories of their lives, their struggles and joys, and felt closer than they had in years. The treehouse, once a playground for their younger selves, had become a bridge back to their shared past. Before leaving, they carved their initials into the freshly painted wood. Emma, Jake, and Lucas knew they might not return for years, but the treehouse would always be there, ready to hold their memories. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with more full-length stories from the list. Certainly. I'll continue crafting full-length versions of all 20 stories. Since they take some time to write, I'll deliver them in batches of 2 to 3 stories per message. Here's the next batch of stories: Grandpa's Garden, Letters from the Attic, and The Lighthouse Keeper. Story 3. Grandpa's Garden ****. Every summer, Jason spent 2 weeks at his grandfather's countryside home. Grandpa's house was small but surrounded by an expansive garden filled with rows of vegetables, blooming flowers, and towering fruit trees. The first morning of Jason's visit always began the same way. Grandpa would knock on his door at sunrise, carrying a straw hat and an extra pair of gloves. "Time to greet the garden," he'd say, his voice warm but firm. Jason groaned but got up, knowing he couldn't say no. Grandpa was already outside, kneeling by the tomato plants. "These are your mother's favorite," he said, holding up a ripe red tomato. "When she was your age, she'd eat them straight from the vine." As they worked, Grandpa shared little pieces of wisdom. "Gardening is like life," he'd say, pulling weeds. "You have to get rid of what doesn't belong to let the good things grow." Jason didn't fully understand then, but he liked hearing Grandpa talk. They planted seeds, watered rows, and picked ripe vegetables. The garden wasn't just a place to grow food, it was a canvas of memories. Grandpa pointed out the sunflowers Jason had planted last year, now towering over them. One afternoon, while pruning the apple tree, Jason asked, "Why do you spend so much time out here, Grandpa?" Grandpa smiled. "This garden gave me peace when I needed it most. After your grandma passed, it was hard. But this reminded me that life keeps growing, no matter what." That summer, Jason felt a deeper connection to the garden and to Grandpa. They spent hours together, planting new flowers and harvesting cucumbers for dinner. On the last day of his visit, Grandpa handed Jason a small trowel. "Take care of your own garden one day," he said. Years later, when Grandpa was gone, Jason returned to the house. The garden had overgrown, wildflowers creeping into the vegetable beds. Jason picked up the old trowel and got to work, feeling Grandpa's presence in every turn of the soil.